All right, let's dive into one of the most epic stories ever told. The journey of a nation from the depths of slavery in Egypt all the way to inheriting a world-changing promise. It's a massive tale of faith, failure, and empires, and it all gets started right here.
But here's the thing that drives this whole narrative, the central question really. How on earth does a story so packed with rebellion, with exile, with one failure after another, how does that ultimately end up being a story of hope? It's a paradox, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
And this whole thing kicks off in the most desperate situation you can imagine. An entire nation is enslaved in Egypt, and the only way out is through a rescue plan that seems absolutely impossible.
You see, after the patriarch Joseph died, the good relationship the Israelites had in Egypt completely fell apart. A new pharaoh came to power who saw their growing population as a threat, so he enslaved them. And for generations, they were just crushed under the weight of forced labor. Now, what's fascinating is that their escape isn't some military uprising. It's a story of incredible divine intervention. God raises up a leader, Moses, and through him, a series of 10 devastating plagues hits Egypt. It all leads to this unbelievable escape through the parted waters of the Red Sea. And even when they're starving in the wilderness, food called manna just appears for them. It's one miracle after another. So getting free was really just the first step. Out there in the middle of nowhere, in the wilderness, this group of ex-slaves is about to be forged into a real nation with a whole new identity and purpose that will shape everything that comes next.
And the bedrock of this new identity is something called a covenant, which they make at Mount Sinai. Think of it like a formal treaty between a powerful king and his people. God basically establishes this special relationship with Israel, and the heart of that deal is the Ten Commandments. It's the blueprint for how to live with him and with each other. But wow, they struggle with it right from the get-go. I mean, Moses is literally up on the mountain receiving the law, and the people down below are already building a golden calf to worship. And then, when they finally get to the border of the Promised Land, they just totally lose their nerve, terrified by stories of giants in the land. Their faith just crumbles. And that massive failure of faith, it had a direct and pretty severe consequence. That entire generation was forced to wander the wilderness for 40 long years, until every single person who had doubted was gone. Okay, so 40 years pass. A new generation, now led by Joshua, finally gets to cross into the Promised Land. But getting there doesn't mean instant peace. Instead, it kicks off a whole new era that's defined by this repeating and often really painful cycle. And this cycle you're seeing here, this pretty much defined their lives for centuries during the time of the judges. It goes like this. They obey the covenant and things are good. They have peace and victory. But then they start to disobey and forget God, which leads them straight into being oppressed by their enemies. In their misery, they cry out for help, and God sends a leader, a judge like Deborah or Samson, to rescue them. But tragically, the peace never lasts, and the whole cycle just starts over again. After a while, the people just get sick of the instability. They look around and say, "Hey, we want a king, just like all the other nations." They're warned it might not be the best idea, but their request is granted. Saul becomes the first king, but it's his successor, David, a shepherd boy who really unites the nation, makes Jerusalem the capital, and starts this incredible golden age. And his son, Solomon, is the one who builds the magnificent temple, a permanent place for God's presence among them. Well, that golden age was short-lived. After Solomon dies, the kingdom splits in two. It's a total tragedy. The northern kingdom, Israel, on the left here, just dives headfirst into idolatry. After a line of 19 corrupt kings, it gets completely wiped out by the Assyrian Empire. The southern kingdom, Judah, manages to hang on a bit longer, but its own deep-rooted unfaithfulness eventually leads to its complete collapse and exile by the Babylonians. Now, during all this chaos with the kings and the divided kingdom, a new kind of leader shows up on the scene, the prophet. We're talking about people like Elijah, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. They were basically God's spokespeople, confronting corrupt kings, warning everybody about the consequences of their injustice and idolatry, and constantly calling them back to the covenant they'd made. And this brings us to rock bottom, the absolute lowest point in the entire story. Everything the prophets had warned them about came true. Jerusalem is conquered, the incredible temple is destroyed, and the people are literally dragged away from their homeland. I mean, just try to imagine the sheer devastation. Everything that defined who they were,
their land, their king, their temple, it was all gone. They're captives in a foreign land, under the thumb of a world power that had just crushed their nation. For so many, it must have felt like God had completely abandoned them. And this wasn't just a slap on the wrist. They were in exile for 70 years. A whole generation was born and died in Babylon, a place so far from the home they had been promised. But even in that darkness, the prophets weren't silent. The thing is, their message started to change. Instead of just warnings about judgment, prophets like Ezekiel and Daniel began speaking about hope. They urged the exiles to hang on and stay faithful. And they promised that God hadn't forgotten them, that one day a restoration was coming. So, how does this story of total failure and exile finally turn around? Well, it's not with some huge military victory. It's actually through a surprising act of grace and the beginning of a whole new season of hopeful waiting. In what has to be one of the most stunning plot twists in history, the Babylonian Empire falls to the Persians. And the new Persian king, a guy named Cyrus, issues a decree that actually allows the Jewish exiles to go back home and rebuild their city and their temple. It's this completely unexpected moment of mercy. Now, this is a really key point. This was not a return to the glory days of David and Solomon. Yes, they were back in their land, but they were still a small, fragile nation, living under foreign rule. The whole thing just felt partial, incomplete. It left them with this deep feeling that God's biggest promises were still yet to come. So when you zoom out and look at this entire sprawling story, you start to see these powerful themes pop up over and over again. It's a really raw and honest look at the human struggle between faith and doubt. It doesn't shy away from the real-world consequences of failure, but it also puts on full display the unbelievable patience and mercy of a God who just keeps working to restore his people, weaving this one continuous story through law, prophecy, and poetry. And that's pretty much where the Old Testament leaves us. The people are back home, the temple is rebuilt, but it all feels unfinished. The promises aren't totally fulfilled yet. The stage is perfectly set, and it's filled with this intense, aching hope for a future Redeemer who would finally make good on everything that had been promised. So the final question isn't just what happened, but who is coming next?